Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, where purpose-driven conversations take center stage. Hey, my name's Dave. Thank you so much for joining us here this week. So one of the things that I have to tell you that can be tough, I think that especially it is tough for those of us that are in the accounting profession, we're in financial services, and we have deadlines and we have things that we need to do, and we are sort of constantly on demand. We have clients pulling at us, and we have the things that we do in kind of our normal work lives kind of pulling at us, and then we also have kind of family obligations and stuff like that going on. I think that at times it is very difficult for us to be positive in the workplace. I think that sometimes it's just tough when we got all those things kind of hanging over our head, that it's difficult for us to really sort of create a positive work environment for not only ourselves but the people around us. I really do think that that is a difficult thing for us to do at times. And I think that, that is one thing, though, that we find that can be very toxic. It can be something that can create a very negative situation for our colleagues and can cause people to quit a good job. It can cause people to go away from a good situation. Is negativity in the workplace. If your workplace is a place that you don't really want to be, guess what? If you're smart and you got skills, you're just going to walk away. And so I think it's important for us to really get a better understanding about how we can kind of invoke positive change in the workplace and help create a good work environment. And that's really what we are going to be discussing today. So we have a fantastic guest that is going to help us out with that. Gretchen Pisano, who is a positive leadership expert. I love that. Okay, a positive leadership expert. She's a speaker. She is a CEO, master coach, and co-founder of P-Link Leadership, and is here today to talk to us all about what I think is a very important topic. So, Gretchen, thank you so much for being on Accountable.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
So I have to tell you, I just got done saying I think it is tough to be positive in the workplace, but yet, I think, this is something that you talk about all the time. I mean, do you find that, organizations have trouble creating sort of positive work environments, or is it just us accountants?
I definitely do not think it's just the accounting profession. It cuts across, and I think in general human beings can have trouble maintaining positivity because our negativity bias is wired into us. It's a lot easier to access.
Yeah. And so, it's kind of almost natural for us to, I guess, look at things negatively. I mean, is that fair to say?
It is, but I have an interesting concept to put forward on that. It is natural for us to look at things negatively because we are wired to observe and perceive and give more weight to things that could be threatening in our environment, right? Like that's what was supposed to be keeping us alive. But we are like a hybrid engine. So we have these dual power sources, and one is negative in nature, meaning like it is fueled by fear and it's designed to keep us safe. And one is positive in nature, meaning it is fueled by hope and it is designed to help us build on compounding returns, which I know accountants understand. And so, but we haven't been taught to think about ourselves in that way. So we often don't even think about like, what is my energy, or do I have the capacity to change? This, like, let's think about it as a charge or a polarity. Do I have the capacity to change where I'm drawing my fuel from at any given time, like the way a hybrid car does? And the answer is yes. Like a hybrid car does that to improve the performance of the vehicle. And we have this incredibly powerful device called our brain that can help us decide what we choose to power ourselves with to improve our efficiency. We just have to learn how to do it.
So I think that that's interesting that you say that. One of the things that I know that you're widely known for is this concept. And help me make sure I get this right. You talk about leading with hope, drive, and rest.
Mm-hmm.
Those seem almost like diametrically opposed to me.
Yeah.
Drive, but I'm rested. So I mean, you're not just talking about, when we talk about positivity in the workplace, we're not just talking about kind of being nice to people and I say good morning when I walk in the door and occasionally I bring donuts. We're
No.
talking about like something I think deeper and more meaningful. Is that right?
Yes. Yes. 100%. So, I think positivity has gotten such a bad name in that regard, a bad rap about it sort of being like Susie Sunshine or, unicorns and rainbows. And really what I would say to you and to all the listeners is that the difference between positive and negative is, how do you feel when you walk away? When you
Yeah.
walk away from that interaction, do you feel, um, you know, fuller, like more energy, or do you feel drained? Like if you feel drained, then you just had an interaction with a negative person because you were using your resources to offset that energy. If you feel pumped up, then they just gave you a little lift, right? Like that
Yeah.
interaction actually created more positive energy. So when we talk about how we lead in a workplace, and we say, oh, I'm going to be a positive, my goal is to be a positive leader. It's that you are lifting everything and everyone around you, including the bottom line, which means that the way that you approach things is you're focused on the outcome that you want to create versus being focused on the thing that you're afraid of or the thing that you want less of. And that shows up in lots of really tiny ways. And you earn a reputation, right? And it's really easy, especially when we're under pressure. It's really easy to get reactive, which means like we're just responding based on our instinct versus slowing the things down and choosing a creative response that helps us get a little bit more of what we want. So that's what I'm talking about with positive and negative, right? It isn't just that you say hello, which of course matters. People want to have that connection. But it is about how you choose to approach decisions and people, challenges, how you frame things up. So the philosophy of leading with hope, drive, and rest really comes out of my own personal experience,
Okay.
which is like I am a recovering relentless striver. And I like to think of myself now, and really what I teach and model in my own company as well as out in the world is the idea of healthy striving. And what I noticed is that drive, if it isn't flanked with hope and rest, is relentless and frankly dangerous for two reasons. One is that drive unchecked will often take you someplace you don't actually want to go. You're just hustling all the time, and you don't lift your head up long enough to say, am I actually moving closer or further away from what I want for myself in my life, who I want to be, what I want to achieve? I've coached a lot of people who have achieved great things and then said, well, but I'm still not happy. Like this isn't actually what I wanted.
Right.
The second reason it's dangerous is that we end up burned out. Right. So like if we don't flank it with these two things, we really end up burned out. And when you're burned out, you're in a state where you don't feel like there isn't any amount of rest that feels to you like it could restore you. You lose motivation, you lose your sense of engagement, things that used to matter to you don't matter anymore. You're just going through the motions, which nobody wants to get there. Like that. Well, I would say almost, they say don't speak in absolutes, right? So I'd say almost nobody wants to be in a state of being burned out. Although in one of my talks, I talk about like as a young professional getting to the place where I literally would daydream about a short-term coma. Like how great that would be, like maybe I could just have like a little accident I'd end up in a short-term coma, which would be like a 3-week vacation that nobody would judge me for. And Dave, I can't, every time I give that speech, multiple people come up to me in the audience and say they've had some kind of a similar version. Now it might be maybe they wish they got sick, or maybe they just, take a break, this idea, right? So that's burnout, right? Like where we think something terrible like that has to happen to give ourselves permission. So leading with hope, drive, and rest is actually a cadence. And I use it both daily and I use it, annually, like big and micro and macro. So the idea of leading with hope is clear vision. What are we moving towards? What do we want more of, instead of really focused on the problems or what we want to avoid? Because the byproduct of knowing what we want to move towards and creating more of what we want is that we can create this, exponential gains instead of always just moving out of harm's way. And then rest is this idea. That's not necessarily sleep. I mean, sleep is great, but rest can be play. It can be humor. It can be time outdoors. It can be physical motion where your brain is, listening to some kind of a music so it can drop into a rote space. And what I do with myself and with my team is that I think about, like, let's talk about micro.
Yeah.
So on a micro basis, every day I think about what are the 3 things that I'm for sure going to get accomplished today before I put my head down on the pillow. Just really super straightforward. Like, what are the 3 things I'm going to make that deal with myself? And if I get more done, great. But if I get those 3 things done, fantastic, right? That's what I'm moving towards. And of all the stuff that's going on, these are the things that are most important to me. Rest might sound like I have an alarm set on my phone that is titled family time to remind myself that I need to get up and leave my desk because I love my work. So I could stay there a very long time. And I have a deal with myself that I only snooze at one time. I have these ambient lights that go on my office at 8:30 in the morning and they go off at 5:30. Tiny little physical cue to make it less pleasant for me to be there, right? So that I am intentional about building in that rest time. I might take a micro rest during the day, meaning I have a yoga mat in my office. I might throw that down on the floor, like that one you see right behind me, yep. And do like a 10-minute practice. In the bigger picture of things, like let's talk about like with my team and the organization that I lead, at least once a year, we're doing an all hands strategy session where they get to weigh in. We all talk about like what our core strategies are, our big priorities are for the year. They contribute to that. We all walk away with a shared picture. That's the hope piece of it. The rest piece of it, during the winter months, we have one Friday a month that's like a no meeting Friday, right? That if people want to take off, they can take off. If they want to work, they can work. But they have that feeling it's okay that they're not falling behind. It's just one day a month, and this is an idea. And we close during the last 2 weeks of the year, right? Rest, refuel, regroup. So in a profession like accounting, you are driven by the tax calendar. And I used to think like 10 years ago, we used to talk about busy season. Yep. But I mean, Dave, right? Is that really true anymore? Isn't it kind of busy all the way around now?
Well,
and just especially worse.
I mean, I have never met a CPA that has ever said to me, Dave, we don't have enough going on.
Right.
I think these days, I think it pretty much is year round. I think that practitioners who don't have stuff going on year round, that's usually that's the rarest of rare.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's year round. So you could say, I could keep doing this. Like, and I would tell you and all my clients, like, if it's working for you, keep doing it.
Right.
If it's not working for you, then you got to figure out how to change. And you can't change the mega system, right? But you can change how you're interacting with it. So how do you start to build in those micro moments of rest, 10 minutes a day? How do you put something on the back end of each busy season that you can look forward to? Maybe it doesn't have to be the 2-week vacation in Mexico, but could it be one day where you have nothing on your calendar, nobody has claims on your time, and you actually do what feels like self-care to you?
Right.
You have a day where nobody is pulling at you. This is harder to do when you have small children, but that won't always be true.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to unpack because you've said a lot here, and I want to make sure that that our listeners are picking up on some of these things because I think that the first thing that I think a lot of people, that their brain jumps to, I mean, I think sort of right or wrong, is they jump to this idea that of kind of this work-life balance idea that I'm not sure really completely exists,
Mm,
and that you can't sort of be driven while also kind of having these other things involved. You're not saying that being driven is bad. That part isn't the problem. It's that when you have sort of uncontrolled drivenness.
right.
I don't know if that's a good term there, but I don't know if my English teacher would be proud of that one. But if you have sort of this uncontrolled drive that isn't tempered by hope, what am I ultimately working towards, and there isn't some sort of offset, to your working life, that's where it starts to sort of spiral out of control. Do I
Yeah.
have that right?
Yes. And so combine the two things we've already talked about, which is the
Right.
negativity bias, which is we are predisposed to be afraid. And then add to that this sort of relentless drive. And you have a recipe for disasters, right? Because you're just kind of always trying to outperform fear and anxiety, which you can't do.
Right.
You can't do so it's the two that we work it two ways, which is one is we want to notice when we're powering ourselves with fear and say, oh, I'm going to switch the engine here and I'm going to choose to power myself with hope, right? And rest because the machine needs that. And I am going to be thinking about the fact that I have to use my higher consciousness to check this drive.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's not a bad thing. And we want to be successful, but
Sure.
burning ourselves out in the process of it is this short term gain.
Yeah. Well, and we should also mention too, I mean, it especially I mean, have found that, most of the time, like once people hit that point of burnout, it's a long way back.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Because it's not like you can sort of like fix burnout. I know that we talk about burnout as kind of like a point in time, but trying to get somebody to recover once they've kind of gotten to that burnout point, that is really hard. It's hard to come back.
It really, it really is. I mean, and a lot of times people have to make major changes to their lives to do that. And, like give something up, like give up a profession that they loved. I guess what I'm, you know, trying to bring to the forefront here is like, if we intervene on behalf of ourselves earlier and these small ways that work into our daily life, then it becomes sustainable, what we're trying to do. And we can become that version of ourselves that we want to. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to work in every environment
Sure.
because there are some workplaces that are led by people who don't accept this philosophy and they've driven themselves. Now, and what I can promise you is it doesn't matter how successful they look on the outside, they are paying a price.
Hmm.
And so it is so important, I think, to be, notice where you're operating. And if it's not where you feel like you can make those adjustments, and you look to make changes down the road, but not because you're burned out. You make those changes because you want to make those adjustments earlier in the process.
Yeah, and I think that that's very well said. So you talked about, I mean, just kind of workplaces being different, and we've talked about some of the negativity that can happen. What are some of the scientific benefits to positivity in the workplace? I mean, why is this so important? Why can't we just have, if somebody's just kind of driven by, hey, it's going to be sort of unchecked drive all the time, drive. Yeah, I might burn everybody out, but hey, I'll make a lot of money along the way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why is positivity so important, and what are some of those benefits there?
So I want to go back to, I forgot one
Yeah,
of
go
your
for it.
questions about the work
Yep.
life balance, which is just a simple tweak is to change the word balance in your mind to balancing. So
Okay.
instead of work life balance, like it's a destination, it's work life balancing. And that might change day to day, week to week, right? Month to month. And it's this ongoing process. But if you are if you are regularly looking at how do I make these things work together? Because let's be honest, we spend most of our waking hours at work.
Yeah.
It is life. It is life. We want to make that a place that we're proud of who we are. Which then takes us back around. So if we think of this idea, work-life balancing, how do I just, how am I doing on this? How was the last 3 days? How do I want to do something different tomorrow? And then we go to that question you just asked, which is why is this important in the workplace? Which is that, I think 2 reasons. One is that, multiple reasons, 2 top reasons. One is that when we're really hard on ourselves, we're hard on other people also.
Well said. Yep. Well said.
And even if we work hard to be nice to other people, to be generous of spirit to other people, which, somebody makes a mistake and you can hold the space for them. That's what I mean by generous of spirit. The perception is that we are judging them as harshly as we're judging ourselves, that we are holding them to as high expectations as we are holding ourselves to. And people make up stories about bosses, right? Based on that.
Sure.
Wow. She was here burning the midnight oil, so she expects me to be too. So I think that's really important. And I think we've all run into people who we've worked for who are really harsh. They're harsh on themselves and they're harsh on the people around them. And to your point, that drives people away. So as leaders, we are responsible for not just getting the work done, but for shepherding the organization and making sure that the organization thrives. But if we are showing up as leaders or cultivating leaders who make it so impossible for other people to thrive in that environment, then to your opening statement, they're going to leave.
Right.
And we used to have them, I shouldn't say we, companies used to have them captive by geography. Yeah. But COVID and the ability to work remotely and people confronting the reality that can actually be effective changed that. So if you don't create a culture where people actually want to work, they're not going to.
Yep.
They're not going to want to work for you. It's just a matter of time till they find another place. And what you're going to get instead is more people that are attracted to that kind of angry intensity, and it will become impossible to change the culture.
Yeah, so you reach a tipping point where it's just kind of you're too far gone and you can't kind of get back.
Yeah, I think about it the analogy that I use is if you're trying to tint a 5-gallon thing of paint, and you have all this one color, and you add just a few drops, a couple positive liters, that's not going to make the difference.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's very well said. I want to because I think you said something really interesting there, because I think especially that are folks that are in financial services, especially CPAs. I think CPAs tend to be pretty driven people. I mean, I think just in general, it just it's in the DNA. They like a lot of them do have the driver personality. I think that in some ways kind of goes along with the profession. But I think what's interesting is that I think for a lot of folks, especially when they get into leadership roles, especially in accounting, is that they assume that if they're working really hard and they're kind of burning the midnight oil, I think is the term that we use, that they're really only affecting them. But I think what you're saying is that even outwardly, even if you're not necessarily sort of outwardly judging your colleagues and your staff based on that standard, they look at you and they kind of think that you are. And so you are sort of inadvertently almost send a negative message without even necessarily meaning to. Do I have that? Do I have that right?
You do. Yep, okay. You do. A lot of leaders don't talk about what they do outside of work that brings them a sense of balance. And it's just a cultural norm. There's not one reason why people don't do it. It's just a cultural norm. But the unintended byproduct of that is that nobody knows. what the
Yes.
leader or leaders
Yes.
are doing, like that they're going cycling, or that, that they maybe go for a walk in the woods, or they go down to the beach, or, whatever, or maybe they go to yoga. I mean, so I think that, and for some people, the work itself is incredibly energizing, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
busy season is this intense sprint, and maybe they have competition in their strength suite, or maybe they have the achiever gene in their strength suite. And so for them, it actually fills them up. But everybody else who's trying to keep pace with them is burning out and feeling like they don't have permission to make time to take care of their physical bodies, to make time to restore their emotional regulation, to make time for the people that they love, to keep a promise to a child or a spouse. And that gets to be a very difficult place to work.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I think that yeah, you just what you do, whether you realize it or not, I mean, matters. I think what a mentor of mine told me at one point in time. He goes, don't underestimate how important you are to your staff. That don't underestimate kind of how important you are, and what you do influences what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is kind of an interesting concept.
And it's easy to do. It's
Yeah,
easy to underestimate it because first of all, we judge ourselves on our intentions, not our
right.
actions. And secondly, like as we kind of move up the leadership ladder, we still see ourselves as ourselves. It's
Yeah,
hard to become aware of wait a minute, how did I become the bear in the room? Like,
yeah,
right? When did
right,
all of a
right.
sudden my footprint, like all of a sudden matter so much?
Yeah,
But it does. It does. And it doesn't matter. Like I have a chief of police I work with, and he's incredibly approachable and easygoing. And he's like, I don't get this. I don't understand. Like,
yep,
why aren't people comfortable? And it's like, it doesn't matter, because when you walk in the door, rank is walking in with you.
yep.
And it doesn't matter if you're the partner, managing partner, junior partner, like that is walking in the door with you.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's less, and maybe you can identify with this because I know you do a lot of speaking. But I distinctly remember at one point in time, a few years ago, somebody quoting me back to me, and I remember thinking that was very strange. I was like, how in the world and why in the world is someone hanging on something I said, which I'm sure I said it. I don't remember saying it, but I'm sure I did. In a room full of people. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I'm like, what I'm doing actually is affecting other people. And so I think that you're
Yeah.
right. I think for some reason we kind of shortchange that a bit. So anyway, I think that's
Yeah.
interesting. Let's change gears slightly here. So, because I want you to talk about this concept of adaptive mindsets, and that kind of goes along a little bit with what we're talking about. But I'd like to hear more about kind of the importance of an adaptive mindset and kind of what you mean by that, because I think this is particularly interesting as well.
Yeah. I love your questions, Dave. I do. I really do. You just pick these cherries. So to adapt means to become better suited to our environment, right? So we can look back from a historical perspective, and the animal kingdom is a great place to look to see how animals adapt or don't adapt. And right, we are one of these creatures. The big difference is like we can decide to decide. We're like the only creature on the planet who has the consciousness that we know of to decide that we want to adapt to become better suited to our environment.
Right.
So the part of that that's important is that learning something new is a lot easier than unlearning something. And so when we talk about having an adaptive mindset, it means that a person in one of my keynotes or in one of our leadership development programs is willing to allow themselves to be changed by the experience, which means that they might have to understand a limiting belief, or maybe they would have to let go of something that always had been true but is no longer true. Like, for the longest time it's true you had to have a butt in a seat,
Yeah.
but now we know that that doesn't have to be. But this is a hard thing to unlearn. right? Dr. Brene Brown, helping people understand how to unlearn the way we've thought about vulnerability historically and have it like differentiate between relational vulnerability and physical vulnerability. How do we unlearn? What does it mean to lead from a routine way versus how do I lead a team that maybe is only in the office 3 days a week? Or like for myself, we are a 100% virtual team and always have been.
Right.
How do I, and I laugh about this. Like a great example is when you learn how to use the backup camera on your car instead of the rear view mirror or the side view mirrors, right? And the diehards are like, you cannot rely on that better technology. You absolutely have to use these side view mirrors, and you have to unlearn all the muscle memory about looking in the side mirrors, and that despite the fact that the technology is better, that your view is better, that it's safer, you know, all those things. So that's what I mean by having an adaptive mindset, means that you approach with curiosity. How might I be wrong about this?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds to me like in order to have that, I mean, you have to have an openness. You also have to have a healthy skepticism about your own beliefs, right? I mean, I think
Yep.
that's at least part of it.
Yeah. I mean, right on, which means you can't be coming from a place of fear where you're always
Right.
trying to protect. You have to come from a place of what we call grounded confidence, where you're like, yeah, like exactly, healthy skepticism. I use that term all the time. Like, I'll say, I welcome healthy skepticism. And what that sounds like is curiosity.
Yeah.
And what unhealthy skepticism sounds like is cynicism
Right. I
and
think that this
certainty. Mm-hmm.
and I think that accountants in particular, I think have an issue with this. I think it's tough. Okay.
I have a theory about
Be,
that.
well, well, here's my thought is because I think part of the reason for that is that frankly in accounting, whether you know, I don't think this is you know, kind of out of bounds here. We get paid to be right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're a tax accountant, you get paid to be right. If you're an auditing, you get paid to be right. You're a
Yep.
CFO, you get paid to be right. And so this acknowledgement that we might be wrong on something, that one hurts, you know, because, you know, we're just kind of trained that like, you know, you got to be right on stuff and that's
Yep.
it.
It's true. And so, and that's exactly what my hypothesis is. But what
Yeah.
I would say is like, as an accountant, lawyers are the same, doctors are the same, is like, you have to discern about when you bring that and when you don't. Right. So
Right.
if like, for example, as a lawyer, you got to be right and really have a winning argument in the courtroom. But is that going to serve you well at home? Probably not.
Right. Right.
Right. And so
Yeah.
like as an accountant, you got to be right about the facts and the figures and how they work together. But then when it comes to interpersonal dynamics, about how a team member may be stepping up or not to a new responsibility, or about how you are when you go home, it is not about being right. It is about getting it right.
Yeah.
It is about making space for other people to grow, to bring their ideas in, to consider alternatives and options. So it's a question of discernment and knowing when do you apply what tool.
Well, but Gretchen, doesn't that necessarily also mean vulnerability? Because I think that that's also kind of what does it is it that it makes us feel vulnerable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if I'm admitting that I am wrong, okay, then
Mm-hmm.
I become vulnerable. I become vulnerable. I'm not you know, I'm not the you know, the I don't know, the perfect leader anymore.
Yes, but in a way, so first of all, the data tells us that leaders who are willing to admit that they are wrong actually improve their reputation.
Well said.
So, and about vulnerability, it's not like, I think, again, sometimes we try to outperform this, right? Like we want to be bulletproof as opposed to building a tolerance for vulnerability. Like we're talking about relational vulnerability here, not
Yeah,
physical
right,
vulnerability, right? We're talking
right.
about relational vulnerability, putting my ego on the line, putting my identity on the line. But what we know is when we build a tolerance for it and we're able to say, you know what, like here's a phrase we use in our company all the time. I don't know if I agree with my thinking yet or not, but here's what it is,
Yeah.
right? It's a
Okay.
beautiful way to like give yourself permission to think out loud, to put it out there, and you're not advocating, you're just putting it out there.
Right. Right.
right? We also
Yeah.
use, go ahead. So stuff like, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, and I think that that's very well said. I think that that is definitely I think a mental shift. I think for a lot of folks for sure. And maybe that kind of plays into something else that I found interesting about you, because you talk a little bit about focusing on momentum versus necessarily focusing in on achievement, especially post pandemic.
mhm.
Can you talk about that? Because I think if you focus in on momentum, I think you're focusing in on the process and making progress as opposed to necessarily achieving, kind of hard goals or not achieving them. Do I have
Yeah.
that right, or am I missing the point?
No, I think you have it pretty close to right. So when you're focusing about momentum, it's kind of a little bit back to energy, right? Like
Okay.
you want people to get engaged in whatever it is you're doing. You want that energy to start to compound. And when we focus on achievement, like this is the thing that we want to make happen as a result of this thing, then we start getting worried about failing.
Yeah.
And playing we start playing smaller so we don't lose face, or we don't have a public failure. And I think that that comment comes from like post pandemic, like everything is in flux. Like we
Yeah.
still don't know, right? We still don't have enough historical perspective to really understand what
Yeah.
the global pandemic meant for us. And so everything is still in flux. So if you get really hyper focused on an achievement, then it's like lunging at a ball. You might be lunging in completely the wrong direction, and then it
Yep.
makes it hard to pivot. If you're focused on momentum, then really what you're thinking about is like, what's the next thing from here?
Yeah. Right.
And ensuring that people are bought into that and they are wanting to do it. And then you get there and then you're like, okay, what did we learn? Now what's the next thing from here?
Yeah. I think that that is especially helpful to somebody. I've spent the bulk of my career in startups, and one of
Mm,
the things that I think is for those of you that are out there, and some of you have heard me talk about this before on various podcasts and things like that, but one of the most humbling things in the world is going into business for yourself, because you find out all of the things that you thought you knew, you probably don't know. So I always find it to be very humbling, and it also is a situation where a lot of times you want it to be kind of up here, but it's just not. And you have to focus in. I think if you focus in on the, kind of directionally, are we moving in the right spot to get to the goal? That is usually going to help you sort of stay energized, because I can tell you that a lot of times, especially with startups, you if you're looking for kind of a just one goal, you're going to fall short.
and then that's going to be demoralizing,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like as opposed to saying like, we sometimes say, what's the 72-hour goal? Like,
Right.
what's the thing we can do in 3 days that would seem
Yep.
so easy we can't imagine not doing it? And I think the other difference is when you have momentum, you have multiple people's energy. You're not the only the leader who's trying to pull everybody along by this sheer force of your own energy, which is exhausting. This is like
Yeah.
you're getting it's everybody in and cares about the thing, and you are keeping the thing close enough, meaning like realizable enough that people feel motivated to achieve it, versus kind of, to your point, this idea of perfection
Right.
that everybody starts to get intimidated about falling short of.
Right. I used to have a boss who used to say, "Perfect is the enemy of the good." I actually think that I think that was Voltaire that actually said that, anyway, I'll attribute it to him. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the idea there, and I think that that's important to keep in mind. We've been talking about the CPA audience over the years. I mean, what words of wisdom would you have for our profession right now? I mean, because we're getting ready. As you and I are recording this, we're getting ready for busy season. We're getting ready for the toughest time of the year. A lot of times, whether you're in auditing or you're in tax, or even and if you're working as a CFO, we're going through year end right now, the
Yeah.
toughest time of the year. what sort of words of wisdom would you have for the folks that are out there that are trying to be positive, but are just have got a lot on their plate at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I have three things. So
Sure.
one is that, don't worry so much about staying positive. Just focus on these, what I call microbursts of positivity. Even one microburst of positive energy in a day, like gratitude, if you do it every day, we have studies out of Berkeley just released about 6 weeks ago that say that can improve our well-being by 25% in a week. Like, who doesn't want a 25% raise? And if your well-being is better, all of your outcomes are better. Your relationships are better, your mindset's better, your productivity is better. So focus on microbursts, right? These are just these little moments that change your biochemistry. The second thing is keep the faith. Like, you have a noble profession that's really built on strong character.
Yep.
Doing good, you're doing good work, really good work, and people need you. And in that, I would say, going back to my idea, this work-life balancing, I really don't worry about the static state, because if we get into work-life balance, it's like, do I pass or do I fail? Is it yes or no? It's like, how am I doing today on work-life balancing? How did I do the last 3 days? What could I do differently tomorrow to be a little bit better? And look for the pioneers in the profession who are willing to do it a different way, instead of holding on to these old business models that are very top heavy, high in overhead, and require this relentless amount of hours. They are out there and they are emerging. And so watch them, look for them, and then just watch them and think about, where you want to be and who you want to be 10 years from now.
Yeah. And so again, that kind of gets back to where you started, which is, is that being driven is great, but we got to have some hope in there. Otherwise, I mean, we're just going to crumble, and we're going to wake up and kind of find ourselves in a situation where it's like we're pushing and we don't even know what we're pushing towards or why we're pushing as hard as we are.
Yep. And but I would say, so yes, the body doesn't lie. So it's that kind of push is either going to show up in your body or in your relationships. But as a kind of sense, we're kind of wrapping up here, just finish on the positive note, which is like, we have this one incredible life on the planet, and we get this one incredible piece of equipment to do it in, which is this body and brain that we have. And so we want to think about, like, how do we want to do that? How do we really want to live into our potential? And living into our potential isn't relentless striving. It is hope, drive, and rest, right? It is healthy striving and thinking about am I moving closer or further away from the person that I want to be?
Yeah, very, very well said. Gretchen, if folks would like to, if the listeners would like to get a hold of you, or they would just like to hear more about some of the things that you are talking about and some of the things that we have been discussing today, what would be a good way for them to connect with you?
Well, I think the easiest way is you can go to our website, which is justplinkleadership.com. You can go to my speaker page. You can connect with me directly there. There's multiple ways you can book a discovery call. You can follow my Instagram. You can subscribe to a twice a month newsletter on LinkedIn. I have a Substack. So there's our mailing list. I'm sending out like what we call leadership mojo tips, and so there are lots of ways to kind of bring my voice in that are on demand. And then if you want to have a discovery call to engage me to speak, then I'm happy to do that as well. Because like I said, I love talking about this stuff. I think it really matters.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. So be sure to reach out to Gretchen and to just take a look at some of the content that she has. There is a lot of great stuff out there. And I think that this is a great message. I think that this is something that we need more of. We need more good leadership in the workplace. We hear so much about the negative leaders. My goodness. Let's try to bring in some positive leadership into the workplace. And I think that, if you're struggling with how to do that, Gretchen's content, I think, is a great place to start. So, Gretchen Pisano, thank you so much for being on Accountable. I enjoyed it, and I think that this is just a great message for everybody.
Thank you, Dave. You're welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for being on Accountable. Folks, thank you so much for joining us this week.